Hello, everyone. I'm John Coleman from Apocatastasis, an Institute for the Humanities, an alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. In this recording, we're going to look at the character of Beatrice in the Commedia Divina, particularly the last part, Paradiso. This is an extraordinary recording that both allows me to instruct a student who wasn't able to make it in class live, and also to give yourself a preview, a taste of the type of instruction you can look forward to at Apocatastasis Institute. Before we get into this delectable topic of literature, I would like to go to the college's website here, apocatastasisinstitute.wordpress.com. And you can find that down below in the description here on BitChute, Rumble, Odyssey, even YouTube. Just check down below. And here we have our sub page for our School of Arts. Like any college, we're divided into schools of arts, schools of science, and forgotten, and most important, School of Theology, theology, arts, and sciences in that particular order. Here, because we're looking at a literary topic, is our School of Arts. And you can find out all about the various courses we offer therein. We have Latin language study. We have all sorts of great history topics that we offer from all times in history. And we also have a lot of literary courses, including 3 just on the Commedia Divina itself. These are 3 separate semester-long courses. And in the first course, we look at the background of Dante Alighieri. Historically, what were his artistic influences? In the second course, we look at the Commedia, of which this is an example, this particular recording. We look at the poetry itself for an entire semester. And then in another course, we look at the afterlife of the Commedia in Western imagination, including various additional pieces of art which were inspired by Dante's piece. We don't just focus on Dante, we have all sorts of other courses looking, for instance, at foundational text in Western literature, modern writing, and folk topics, as well as others. We're always adding to our repertoire. And so with that being seen to, let's set ourselves up for the study ahead. We're going to be using Charles Williams' text on the figure of Beatrice. This is a 1942 publication, and it's still in print and still being put out of the presses. And well, it is. Williams gives us much to consider in his work. I have looked and reviewed this text in the past. You will also find that down below. This is an adjunct for our time together, but that particular recording just looks at his treatment of Beatrice. What does Beatrice mean to Dante, the character in the Commedia? What does she mean to him historically? And indeed, why is she placed where she is within the sweep of the poem? In class, and this recording is primarily to a particular student, so I will be speaking in such a manner, but I think you can pick up what the context is. Even if you are not that particular individual, there are, I'm told, 7 billion people. You're probably not that one person, but in any case, we have talked in class about how queer Dante is in his use of Beatrice. And we see that in a few different ways, one of which is when Dante has the meeting with Beatrice. Now, she is mentioned, of course, in Canto 2. Canto 1 is the famous first canto, "When I awoke in a dark wood midway this way of our life." Dante wakes up on Good Friday morning in the woods in Mediares. Canto 2, he encounters 3 beasts, and he meets Virgil, and it's Virgil who cuts Dante in onto the intervention that will be the subsequent commedia. That is to say, Beatrice in heaven, Beatrice, this woman he had met only twice in life and had died very young, I think 24, maybe she was 24. She sees Dante, who carries on with his life into his mid-30s. The poem takes place when Dante is 35 years old, midway this way of our life. This is halfway through the 70 years that Psalm 89-90, depending on your Septuagint or Masoretic numbering, gives for the lifestyle of a man, the lifetime of a man. I just said a cuss word, the lifestyle. No, the lifetime of a man is 70 years, 80 if he is strong. Dante's 35 at the beginning of the Commedia. Beatrice sees him messing up in life and taps the Virgin Mary and Lucy and the heavenly host on the shoulder and gets Virgil to precipitate this storyline. We have not met Beatrice at all until the very end of Purgatorio. We have not had a mention of her since that Canto 2. And this is something Williams brings to our attention. And obviously, if this was a modern film or a modern book, this would not be the case. We would cut to the chase. We want to get into the romance. But not for Dante. Dante knows the rule of life, the rule of drama, the rule of virtue is restraint. There is a particular gentleman online. He is called the Distributist. His baptized name is Dave the Distributist. And lately, Dave the Distributist had a very interesting insight. He said that there will be no dramas made about polycules. That is to say, in the postmodern degenerate West, there is the logical conclusion of dating, which must necessarily be that there will be no exclusive husbands and wives, wife swapping, we used to say in the old days. And in ways far and near, I'm noticing that this is picking up steam. But Dave the Distributor said that there will be no dramas about polycules, and that's the buzz term for these disgusting relationships. Why are they disgusting? And why will there be no dramas made about such arrangements? Because by definition, these arrangements have no restraint to them whatsoever, and not just sexual, but emotional, psychological, and other ways as well. There's no restraint. The only thing that makes drama and makes life and makes virtue, literally, the only thing that is the ens, E-N-S is a Latin term, come from esse. The only thing that gives these things being is restraint. Dante has restraint, and so he does not unleash Beatrice until the poem is nearly, 60, there's 100 cantos altogether, so 68% through? This is not how we would do a modern film. We would cut to the chase indeed. Not Dante. Restraint is the name of the game. And so we meet Beatrice, and when we do, also different than our days, and the student in class will know the reference. The meeting is not lovey-dovey. It's not full of fireworks and tingies and this sort of thing. Warm feelings. No. Beatrice is stern. When Dante crosses the wall of fire, pursuant to St. John's Apocalypse, pursuant to Moses's Genesis, pursuant to Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire, when Dante crosses into the earthly paradise and eventually meets Beatrice, she is not effusive. She is not warm in any sense. She's pissed off at Dante and the mess he was making of his life. Now, something that Charles Williams brings up to us in The Figure of Beatrice, the 1943 book, is something that is easy to lose. When the Commedia takes place on Good Friday of the year 1300, and when Dante is 35 years old, he is at the peak of his power, and he is at the time of life for himself when everything was in the palm of his hand. In other words, Dante was not exiled. Dante was not exiled. It's easy for us because we have a jumble of timelines and we have a jumble of themes in the Commedia. It's easy to lose this reality. Dante sets the poem when he was in his greatest power and worldly success in Florence. And it is at this moment of life that Charles Williams points out. It is at this moment of senatorial power, political power. He was like a town council big shot in Florence. It is at this point that Dante's soul was most in danger of being lost. Lost to life, lost to virtue, lost to hell, lost from heaven, as you like. And that's a tremendous insight of Williams' text. So when Beatrice meets Dante, she is ticked off. And I would like now to recap the closing lines of the Purgatorio, and then have a few words from Williams, and then get into Canto 1 from the Paradiso, where we have this fantastic ascent into heaven. So let me turn on the screen share. I fear I've clicked on a link on the internet browser, but we will roll with the punches. Okay, so here we go. So this is the Canto 33 of Purgatory. We're about to jettison into heaven. So these are the final lines. If, reader, I possessed a longer space for right in it, I yet would sing in part of the sweet draught, like I just took of this tea here, that ne'er would satiate me. So Dante's at the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, the river of, as he's going to reinterpret it, healing from sin. But inasmuch as full are all the leaves, made ready for the second canticle, the curb of art no farther lets me go. From the most holy water I returned regenerate in the manner of new trees that are renewed with a new foliage, pure and disposed to mount unto the stars. Two things strike me here, one of which are the closing lines of this middle part of the Commedia. Once again, just like at the very end of hell, we have a reference to the stars. In these transitional points, as we spend a great deal of time looking at during the middle part of Purgatory, which also, of course, forms the middle part of the Commedia, here too we have a transitional point where Dante can take us as the reader and reorient ourselves, literally reorient, to use the old word there of, finding the North Star and deducing the East or the Oriens from that star. We are looking in the Commedia, outside of Beatrice, outside of Dante, the artist, Dante the soul, Dante the Christian, outside of the commentary on virtue and on art and on the politics of the day and the papacy and all this jazz. We are fundamentally, at the end of each canto, taken to the ultimate orientation of the good of God, of the eternal, and the eternal goodness of heaven. We are oriented spatially to the stars. We lift up our eyes. Dante is such a creature of the high medieval period. Again, he's writing right before the Black Death, and the Black Death precipitates in a century and a half, 2 centuries, the transition to the early modern period where the suppositions of life in the West are changing quite a bit. Dante, however, is a high medieval man. And with this reference to the stars, I must remind yourself and myself of the great architectural feature and fad of the day, and that is the Gothic cathedral. What is the Gothic cathedral? What is the Commedia? What is the Christian life as Dante sees it? It is the looking up. It is the sublimation of all that is good, even the seemingly most minimal. Everything is swept up, even the non-Christian, even the wicked in their own way, as Dante lays it out. Everything is subsumed into this looking up. And so we close the Purgatorio on that note. Pure and disposed to mount unto the stars, as Longfellow uses it. By the way, the translation here and for the Paradise Canto 1 are Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and his translation. Something else I'd like to bring your attention to, if we can tease this out. This expression, the second canticle. I'm going to start a few lines before. For writing it, I yet would sing in part of the sweet draught that ne'er would satiate me. But inasmuch as full are all the leaves made ready for this second canticle, the curb of art no farther lets me go. On the most holy water I returned, etc., to look into the stars. Okay. Made ready for this second canticle, Dante is reorienting ourselves, and that also includes a meditation on the Inferno. Now, the Inferno is what most people read, even in incipits. I've taught it in other courses in passing, and the part that I teach is the Inferno, because it is the most popular, in the truest sense of the word, part of Dante's Commedia. Now, look at this. We're about to go into heaven, the final third of the poem. And yet Dante refers to it as the second canticle. To quote David Allen White, late of the Naval Academy, late of the Society of St. Pius X, I think he's mucking around with the resistance these days, and a fine head on his shoulders he has. When people read the Commedia, and if they only read the Inferno, which most of us do, it is like going to Paris and just hanging out in the sewers. Now, if you're Victor Hugo, that's fine. He wrote quite a bit about the sewers of Paris. But have you truly seen Paris? Have you truly felt the soul of Paris if you have just literally seen their lowest and meanest parts of the infrastructure of the city? No, you cannot possibly say that you truly are a Francophile, having visited Paris and only seen the mechanical and the disgusting in the sewer system. Victor Hugo notwithstanding. Look at this. Made ready for the second canticle. We're going into what Dante says is the second part. In other words, he's not counting hell. The part of the Commedia which we all spend time thinking about, he is not considering it. It's not even worth considering part of the Commedia, not just on an artistic level, although we find out that art is going to go no farther. Just like Virgil, quite recent to this section of the journey, had to duck out, so does art. Perhaps that's what Statius kind of represents, his disappearance from the story. As we'll find out in great effusions going forward, Dante will constantly be begging the muses and the saints and God and this sort of thing, the Holy Spirit, to help him express the beauty. He didn't need their help so much in the first two parts of the canticle and the commedia. What he does now to express, like St. Paul says in, I think, 2 Corinthians chapter 9, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, etc. Right? He has not needed them so much, though he's occasionally called on the muses and such, but he will for the last third. So art has reached its end. Reason has reached its end. The point, though, is that the author is not considering the Inferno as part of the real canticle. In other words, and this is my final comment on the Purgatory section, just like Dante himself said, he's bringing everything full circle. Just like Dante himself said at the start of Purgatory, now the journey begins. All that stuff in hell was simply a wake-up call to begin the journey. So the real commedia only began at the beginning of the Purgatory section, and now we are getting into the second half. You see the mathematics? The poem has thirds. It's broken into 3 parts. And yet Dante is telling us that only the Purgatory and the Paradiso are really the journeys. That's where actual virtue and actual growth is being made. Everything in the Inferno was simply to get back to baseline, to get back to zero. Okay, let's find out about Beatrice. That's what you showed up for. And so let me just renew these different links here. Don't you love Windows 10? And don't you love me commenting on Windows 10 all these years? So here is a digital photograph of Dante meeting Beatrice. This was actually taken at the time when he met her, let's say 700 odd years ago. No, of course not. But it's reenacted, just like we reenact all sorts of memorable things. So we have some images of Beatrice here. This is also a recollection of Dante's second meeting of Beatrice. He often portrayed a lot older than he would have been. I mean, his second meeting of Beatrice, he would have been 24. He looks about 54 in this painting here. Beatrice is holding it down there in the mauve, stretching back there at a good, what was she, 19 or something when they had their second meeting. He met her once, as he recounts for us, both incidents in his Vita Nuova. He meets her once when they're about 8 years old, and it's love at first sight. And then he meets her, thinking about 19 or thereabouts. So, okay, so Dante's not even 25. He's looking indeed quite a bit rougher than Beatrice is. But here we go. Here's the painting. And we have a few images here. Here's the image that, of course, appears on the beginning of the Charles Williams text, the figure of Beatrice, actually. Hi, everyone. John Coleman quickly here in the middle of this presentation to invite you to go over to Apocatastasis Institute.wordpress.com. And while there, in the drop-down of About the School, you can find out all about just that, the classes we offer, information about enrollment and matriculation, our schools of theology, arts, and sciences, as well as our campus and staff and testimonials, in addition to related materials. We accept students of about 16 years of age and up and teach at the undergraduate level. And with that, back to the show. So let's indeed hear from Williams. And to do this, I will change the camera. You see this affair here is our document camera, your tuition dollars at work, your donation dollars at work. We turn all of your kindness into benefit for you. So let me just wrestle with things here, and we'll read from Williams' own text. And this first section here, as I flip to the page, is from the second chapter entitled Beatrice. And we'll let the camera go on here. He says the Vita Nuova is said to have been written when Dante was 26, directly after the death of Beatrice. Now, you'll recall that the Vita Nuova was a text which ended with Dante's boast that he would make a poem unlike any other poem. And I'll make a little index card here. Okay. Let me conclude that thought. So he says he'll make a poem like any other poem. And so he does with the Commedia, a love poem, no less. But what is remarkable is indeed the impact the death of Beatrice had. This pivotal Vita Nuova is precipitated by Beatrice. So we see the impact the woman had on himself. So we read here on the end. He is reported in mature years to have been much ashamed of having made this little book. This is likely enough. Shakespeare, at the time of King Lear, probably had no great opinion of Romeo and Juliet. The greater poet, as Williams says, Dante, the farther his later achievement from his earlier. Even in our degree, we can feel a little from the midst of the Paradiso, how tender, how thrilling, but how young and small a thing it, the Vita Nuova, is. That does not prevent it from being much beyond our own capacities at 26, certainly. Was our poetry better at Dante's own age? Okay, so let's just be clear about that. Dante was 26. I've thrown out a few ages here off the cuff. But if Dante and Beatrice are both 26, then there we go. That's when she died, and that's when near after Dante made his own poetic meditation. It is a conventional book. That is, it is written according to the literary habits of his time, habits that Dante, of course, lauds with great acclaim throughout the Commedia. Dante was acquainted with contemporary poets and writing more or less in their style. He himself tells us how he sent the first sonnet to various well-known poets, famosi trovati in quel tempo, their tunes, in other words, and how some of them answered him, and how one answer was the beginning of a friendship between him and its writer, who become the chief of his friends. This too is natural enough. It has a kind of epistolary agreement with, and he quotes, what things we have seen done at the Mermaid, or to Wordsworth reading of the Prelude to Coleridge. But Wordsworth was then 36. The Prelude was begun when he was 30. The event of which he was writing had taken place some years before. It is of interest, as I'm wrestling with my book and the camera, which isn't quite on even keel, it is of interest to observe that the great crisis in Wordsworth's early experience, the declaration of war by England against France, that is against the Revolution, took place when he was 23. The death of Beatrice is supposed to have taken place when Dante was 24. All right, so now we have our ages straightened out, no thanks to me. So Beatrice died when she was 24, which I think was my initial guess off the cuff. Dante was 26 when he made his poetic foray into that meditation, of which he concluded to make a love poem unlike any other poem, which we call the Commedia. This, at least, I carry on with Williams, on the assumption that she was Beatrice Portinari, which I don't think is that gainsayed these days. Whether she was or not, whether her actual name was Beatrice or not, is, turning the page, let's see, I'm trying to get this squared away. Okay, lift this up. Is another, as I wrestle with this thing, is another less important matter. There was a girl, for 4 centuries, no biographer and no commentator doubted that the physical reality of Beatrice. And as I say, that is pretty much in the 80 years since Williams wrote this book, that's pretty much the scholarship as well. Nobody's really doubting that there was a Beatrice, and most people don't doubt that Beatrice that Dante has gone on about is Beatrice Portinari. So, with that opening meditation by Charles Williams, let us get into Canto 1 of the Paradiso, now that we've been set up properly. I'll switch the camera here to our main fella. And we're going to ascend into heaven with Dante, with Beatrice, but with the cravat that human language, art, the artist's skill fails Dante himself, which he's very clear about. Okay. So, Paradiso Canto Wahid. The glory of him who moveth everything doth penetrate the universe and shine in one part more, in another less, within that heaven which most his light receives. Was I and things beheld which to repeat, nor knows nor can, who from above descends. Because in drawing near to its desire, our intellect engulfs itself so far that after it the memory cannot go. Think Plato on the street. You know, they said Plato would be walking down the street and he would just stop. He would forget where he was. Sometimes we can think ourselves into a ball. We can think ourselves into a corner, or whatever simile you like. And I think that's what Dante is laying out for us here. The intellect can take us so far, but as we all know, for many's a late night, or many's an early morning, we can overthink things, which is another way to say that we can exceed the limits of intellect. At this point, faith must take over. Truly, he goes on, whatever of the holy realm I had the power to treasure in my mind shall now become the subject of my song. O good Apollo, for this last prize, make of me such a vessel of thy power, as giving the beloved laurel asks. Now I'm struck with 2 things here. One is that at certain places and times during the classical pre-Nicene era, Jesus, or Yahushua al-Hamashiach, or Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ, was likened to Apollo. Now that's something that's been distorted since the Enlightenment in ways that I've spoken about before. I'm not going to reiterate all of the nonsense about Jesus being Osiris and all of this stuff. The reality is the early Christians were just as proud to drink from the classical pagan stream as from the Hebraic stream, without getting into the nonsense about Christianity being a repackaging of paganism. That's not the case. What is the case, though, is that Christians did not blush, like modern Christians blush, to use the beauty of classical paganism and the beautiful things and the true things that it expressed about reality. Early Christianity, including the simile of Christ to Apollo, didn't blush to make such connections. This is not to bless the whole Apollo cult, but it is to To reiterate, as Dante is doing for us in this Canto 1, the fact that Dante's Christianity, pre-Reformation Catholicism, basked in whatever natural insights that so-called paganism made. Dante's not blushing for that. Oh, good Apollo, he's asking, for this last enterprise, etc. The second point is towards the Hebraic strain of Christianity, where comes the whole Bible story and the people of God and Beni Israel and so forth. The vessel. I'm struck by Paul's expression, I think also in one of the Corinthian epistles, of himself saying, and by extension, the Christians, we are vessels of the Holy Spirit. So this is Dante. This is Dante drinking deeply from the classical font and the Hebraic font, which produced Catholicism, Mediterranean Christianity, if you like, whatever. Both traditions are flaunted in this beginning part of the Paradise. And he goes on, as giving the beloved laurel asks, one summit of Parnassus, classical world, hitherto has been enough for me, but now with both strains, faith and reason, the Hebraic revelatory strain of Catholicism, the classical pagan strain, with both, I needs must enter the arena left in the sense of what's left over, the remaining part of this story, not left or right. Spatially, enter into my bosom, Apollo. Apollo, who's Apollo in the classical imagining? The most perfectly formed physically, the most beautiful, right? The highest classical beauty. Enter me, enter into my bosom, thou, and breathe your beauty into me. As at the time when Marsus thou didst draw out of the scabbard of those limbs of his, O power divine, lendest thou thyself to me, so that the shadow of the blessed realm stamped in my brain can make manifest. Thou wilt see me come unto thy darling tree, and crown myself thereafter with those leaves, of which the theme, and thou shalt make me worthy. Of which the theme, and thou shalt make me worthy. For Dante, getting back to reorientation, for Dante, this part of the Commedia, now we're beginning the Paradise section, this is a time to remind ourselves about art. And as I said prior to this recording, or in the earlier parts of this recording, restraint is the tone of voice that we have for art. Restraint gives art, literally, it gives it form, and it gives it power, right? Water without restraint is called an ocean, which for most of its space can do next to nothing, except for the shoreline, where there is the restraint between dry and wet. Something that has no restraint at all has no power. That's the mystery of marriage. The mystery of marriage is that potentiality, in ways romantic and physical, is harnessed. Only if you harness art, just like if you can only harness sexuality into an exclusive realm, only with the harnessing and the demarcation of liberty and the constraint of liberty, only when that is directed can you have greater things come forward. And that is fundamentally, to Williams' point, that is fundamentally what Beatrice provides. She provides this channel for the artist to express his love and to express his creativity. That's what Beatrice represents. The water, to go back to the water expression, the water which is uncontrolled is an ocean, but the water which is directed becomes a laser beam. And in fact, there are machines that do just that. They direct water. You can cut granite with water. You can, when things are harnessed, when art is harnessed, as we have here, of which the theme limits you. If you choose a theme, like Dante, the themes of art, the themes of love, divine and human, themes of repentance, you limit yourself. Only then can you have power in your expression. And that's what Dante is saying here. Of which the theme and thou shall make me worthy. So seldom, Father Apollo, do we gather them for triumph or of Caesar or of poet. So now we have Dante again, that shameless embrace, that blushingless embrace of the classical world, the Roman triumph, the Caesar, or of poet. Dante has, as we used to say in the 90s, good self-esteem. Dante knows what the vocation of the artist is. More importantly, Dante knows what the vocation of the Christian is. He did not know that at the beginning of this poem. He began in a dark wood, whatever that means, however that was meant to be taken. And it's meant to be taken deliberately, mysteriously. But whatever that means, by this point, as we're beginning the last stretch of the Commedia, Dante is including the poet and the artist's vocation and the Christian's vocation, along with the triumphant Roman general, along with the triumph of triumphs, Caesar's entry into Rome. The fault and shame of human inclination, that the Pennian foliage should bring forth joy to the joyous Delphic deity. When any one it makes to thirst for it, a little spark is followed by a great flame. Perchance, with better voices after me, shall prayer be made that Kira may respond to mortal men by passages diverse. Uprises the world's lamps, but by that one which encircles four, uniteth with three crosses. We'll get into all of the symbolism of the crosses and the numbers going forward. Get ready for a lot of symbolism in heaven. Eye has not seen. I believe that's 2 Corinthians chapter 9, etc. Right, so Dante, Dante calls the bluff of St. Paul in that chapter, whatever that chapter's numbering is. He calls the bluff. Well, I'm going to express heaven in ways that language fails, but I'm going to try to do that through language. So I'll constantly be calling on inspiration to do this. With better course and with a better star, conjoined it issues, and the mundane wax tempers and stamps more after its own fashion. The mundane wax is that language. We have this meditation throughout of the failure of language. The failure of language to convey reality. Is that the reality of Beatrice? Certainly the reality of God, the reality of repentance, the reality and the limit of reason and the limit of art. All of these things, even things that are in the mundane world held up to be sublime, like art, like liturgy, to the whole central part of the Commedia, especially of the Paradiso, the mundane wax. Getting back, there's so many themes here. Forgive me for tripping over some of them, but getting back to the idea of St. Paul's assertion that we are vessels, clay vessels. We are weak, shatterable things that carry the divine. So Dante has this meditation on the mundane. Let's read that again on our final meditation altogether, wherever it is. Here we go. A few lines before, a few lines after. With better horse and with a better star conjoined, it issues, and the mundane wax tempers and stamps more after its own fashion, almost that passage had made morning there, etc. The mundane wax. That too is one of the meta themes of the Commedia. The day-to-day, the unsparkling. That's one of the great themes of the Holy Bible, in fact. The uninspiring can be used by God in the incarnation as soon as anything else. So we have a great expression there. The mundane wax. That is to an earlier theme in this presentation, the whole idea of the Roman classical Mediterranean empire, pagan empire, and the Judaic, Hebraic mythology and skeleton. That is your Mediterranean Catholicism. It is the merger, it is the shameless merger of the two. A weak, dead woman, dead to the eyes of the world, like Beatrice, is this mundane wax because she's not dead after all. She's more alive than she ever was in her 24 years. This is genius. And Dante, in this symphony of themes, is reorienting ourselves to what this means. And all of this is focused through, as Charles Williams says, the figure of Beatrice. Beatrice represents the final laser beam fire hose of revelation, of truth, and of beauty through that mundane wax, through this earthen vessel, if you like. This cacophony of themes, this weak, I must have to call on Apollo myself, this weak attempt to convey the diversity of themes that we see in Canto 33 of the Purgatorio into Canto 1 of the Paradiso. The fire hose, the restriction, the restraint that allows all of this to be its most powerful is that mundane wax of Beatrice. With that being seen to you, I think I've made my point. I think, more importantly, Charles Williams has made his point. I think Dante Alighieri has made his point. Restraint is the mark of art. Thank you for joining me for this presentation. Do consider enrolling in one of the classes of Apocatastasis, and I will see you for the next presentation. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that presentation brought to you by Apocatastasis Institute. If you would like to assist our work, you may do so by going to apocatastasisinstitute.wordpress.com/contact, and you can access our donations website, rhetoricanova.xyz. You can find that down below in the description. See you next time.